Hi folks, HR Funk here. Out on the range today to talk to you about a drill that you see pretty frequently in the law enforcement qualification course videos that I have produced in that series so far. You also see this drill very commonly in firearms training as well as in firearms competition. And that's the drill that's commonly called the failure drill, also sometimes called a body armor drill. Now when you see the drill fired, usually the shooter fires 2 shots in rapid succession to the body and then a follow-up shot to the head. The problem that I'm seeing with this drill has been bothering me for a while, and it really was something that I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of days since I had an email conversation with my friend Tom Crawford, who I refer to as Brother Tom because he and I are so like-minded in terms of firearms training. When you see the failure drill done most often, it's fired at a distance from about 2 or 3 yards from the target back to a distance of about 7 to 10 yards from the target. And the shooter gets a time limit somewhere between 2.5 and about 5 seconds depending on the distance from the target and whether or not the shooter begins with the firearm holstered or if the shooter begins in a ready position with the firearm already in the hand. Normally when you see the failure drill, it looks like this. Now at this point you may be saying, okay HR Funk, so what's the problem? Well, if we're firing this drill just for fun, and it is fun to see exactly how fast you can put those shots in target like that, 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head. Or if we're firing it in competition to try to see who's the better shooter, I don't have any problem with this drill at all, just the way it was performed. The problem comes in when we're using this drill to train people to defend themselves with a handgun. And the first problem is we're training the shooter to fire to a time limit, not to an effect on the part of the target. When the shooter fires this drill, whatever the time limit is the maximum amount of time for that person to fire those 3 rounds. When the time limit expires, regardless of where those rounds hit, the shooter is done and comes back to a ready position or reholsters the pistol or whatever. When we think about the tactical philosophy underlying this particular technique, the reason it was developed was to simulate a hostile aggressor posing a lethal threat toward the shooter, who in response draws and fires 2 shots to the body of that hostile aggressor. The shooter then, upon seeing that those first 2 shots to the body did not stop the aggressor, then resorts to a headshot in an effort to finally stop that person from whatever they're doing that poses the lethal threat in the first place. When we fire the drill, like I did just there, there's no assessment of those first 2 shots that takes place. Essentially, the shooter is firing all 3 shots regardless of what happens. In a real situation, it might not be necessary, and it might not even be legally justifiable to shoot all 3 of those rounds. If you fire your first 2 shots to the body and the person stops and is no longer posing that lethal threat, then there's no reason to fire that shot to the head. Doing so could put you in peril legally. Also, when you fire those 3 shots, just like I did a couple of minutes ago, there's nothing at the end to cause you as the shooter to continue covering the target. Essentially, as I said a moment ago, after that 3rd shot, you're automatically coming back to the ready position. So if one of those shots missed, which usually is the headshot, again, it doesn't make any difference really where the shots go. You're firing those 3 shots in whatever time limit is, and wherever they go, and whatever effect they have or don't have doesn't make that much difference, and it should. Also, if we're training the shooter after that last shot to automatically come back to a ready position or automatically go to the holster or do anything other than stay on target and be prepared to fire another follow-up shot, we're doing that shooter a disservice. because if the shooter comes out in an actual lethal force encounter and fires 2 shots to the body, which don't stop the aggressor, and then fire that 1 shot to the head, and it still doesn't stop the aggressor, if the shooter's muscle memory is to return to a ready position, then we basically trained he or she to stand there patiently and wait for the aggressor to finish attacking them. Obviously, that's not a good idea either. Now, part of the problem comes from the fact that on the range, we're firing at a stationary paper target that's not going to react like an actual human being would react if they were shot. So in order to have the shooter fire and be able to assess that shooter's performance some way, we impose time limits and we have targets with specified areas and things like that. There are ways to deal with this type of a situation in training to help the shooter. Usually that involves either force-on-force training, which has the officer shooting through scenarios with people role-playing different parts, or through firearm simulator training. And those are both very good types of training, but depending on the equipment that's used, it can be expensive, and it's also usually labor-intensive. Also, the shooter doesn't get the ability to practice with their firearm firing live ammunition. So, is there a way that we can come up with to have the shooter train more realistically, assess their shots, and react accordingly to what the target does, use their actual firearm with real ammunition, and still get the training benefit that they would get firing this drill? Yes, there is, and what we have to do is come up with a better target. And here are the items I'm going to be using to make our new reactive failure drill target. And those items are a cardboard box, a ball of string, some balloons, and a roll of shipping tape. In all these items, I have less than $5. And one thing about this box, it's a little bit smaller than I would normally like to use, but for demonstrating the process of making this target, I think it's going to work just fine. The first thing I'm going to do is start to make the basic shape of our target. And in order to do this, I'm going to remove a section of cardboard here and here on either side to roughly make this a body and then this a head on top of it. I am going to leave the sides in place though. I'm just going to remove squares right here on both the front and back, and then I'll show you what to do next. And after 5 minutes or so of not particularly grueling work, my box now looks like this. And what I'm going to do at this point is collapse these shoulders, or maybe I should say collapse these corners, to make shoulders that more or less follow the contours of our head, just like that. Now I'm going to wrap this with tape just to give it all some support. And there's our new supported and improved failure drill target. The last thing I'm going to do is cut a hole in the center of the top of the head of our target. There's that hole in top of the head. And I almost forgot, I'm also going to have to remove the bottom of this box. Now when we hang our target, we want to pass our string down through this hole in the top. And we use it to tie our balloon. Just like that. So now when we hang our target, it is filling this space right where you would want that headshot to hit if you were firing at an actual adversary. Again, the dimensions on this head are off a little bit. I could take more time and proportion things a little bit better, but you get the idea of how the target works. There are a couple of finishing touches I like to do with these targets. One is I like to put a photo target over top of this so it actually looks a little bit more humanoid. And the other is to take an old vest or just a vest carrier and put it on the target. Like so, just to reinforce the idea when officers are going through training, if they see a vest, and particularly if they fire a failure drill and hit the vest and there's no reaction on the target as far as falling, that again helps to condition that response to move up then and fire the final shot, or as many final shots as it takes, because just like with a real person, if the officer's shot manages to miss that balloon and the target stays up, they might have to fire additional follow-up shots to finally get the target to fall. For the sake of time today, I'm not going to put the photo target on the front of this target. I'm just going to take it out to the range as is, and we'll see how our new improved failure drill target performs. So I've now installed our new improved failure drill target in the target stand, and you can see it even has some movement to it. I tied it down a little bit with string to the side, but if it wasn't so windy out, I would not have that string there, and I would allow a little bit more movement. And especially for snipers, if you want to train them to maintain their patience until they get just the right shot, take those strings off, let this thing swing and move in the wind, and let them time their trigger squeeze so they make that precise shot. But as far as the failure drill goes, let's see how it works now with this new and improved target. Now, as you notice, that time through the drill, I took a little bit more time to assess my shots. When I saw that my target didn't drop after the first two shots to the body, I came up to the head and fired that precise headshot. When my target fell, I followed it to the ground, and then I continued covering it as long as it still was potentially a threat. Because as you know, just because your hostile adversary is down doesn't necessarily mean that adversary is out. So changing up the target does a lot of things to improve this drill, and you can also do a lot of other things. You can set up multiple targets, some of them with bigger balloons in the body, so those targets drop with body shots. Other ones, as I said, when your shooter encounters those and fires at the body, if they don't drop, then he or she can transition to the head and fire that head shot after assessing the ineffectiveness of those first body shots, and fire that shot to the head that would then be necessary and, at least as far as the scenario is concerned, legally justifiable. One of the big advantages to using our new and improved failure drill target is we're training the shooter to react to the target, not to some arbitrary time limit. You notice when I fired that last exercise, there was no buzzer at the end to sound the end of the time limit. That's because I'm firing until my target reacts, not until I hear a buzzer. That's important because in an actual situation, if the first three shots fired by the shooter fail to neutralize the hostile adversary, you don't want to train that shooter to just come back to a ready position and hope for the best. You want the shooter to stay up on target and continue to fire follow-up shots until that hostile adversary no longer is presenting that lethal threat. To demonstrate that, this time I'm going to shoot the drill again, and I'm going to fire my first three shots, and I'm going to intentionally miss the headshot. And rather than coming back and giving up, I'm going to stay up on target and continue to fire follow-up shots until my attacker goes down and no longer poses that simulated threat. One last thing before I go, folks. I want to show you this new Skip Boyer original holster creation that I'm wearing today. This is the latest one from Skip for my Rock Island Armory 1911, and I'll see if I can get a close-up of this. He sent it with a matching magazine holder. If you're interested in having Skip make a holster for you, you can find him online on Facebook, actually, on Always Faithful Holsters. That's the name of his company, and he can make a holster for you just like the ones that he's made for me. And that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you order anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you order from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.